would you tell me all about your first sexual experience?
My first sexual experience.
Imagine this. For 30 unforgettable years, one man ruled late-night television with a quiet iron fist and a smile that hid more secrets than America ever realized. Night after night, millions tuned in, laughing, gasping, mesmerized, as Johnny Carson shaped the careers of Hollywood's brightest stars with nothing more than a raised eyebrow or a single, perfectly timed question. But behind that legendary desk lay a different story, a private list, a list no producer ever saw, no journalist ever uncovered, and no audience ever knew existed. A list of the 7 women Johnny Carson valued more than all the others who walked onto his stage. 7 extraordinary female guests who didn't just charm America, they captivated Johnny himself. Women whose brilliance, charisma, and unpredictable energy carved a permanent place in Carson's guarded heart. For decades, the truth remained hidden, buried under applause, laughter, and carefully edited footage. But today, for the first time, the full story of these 7 remarkable women is finally revealed, not as gossip, not as rumor, but as a deeply human look into the guests who shaped the private world of the most powerful man in late-night history. Before we uncover those 7 names, we must return to where it all began, to understand why Johnny Carson valued authenticity, talent, and feminine brilliance more than any other host of his era. And that journey starts with his childhood. Johnny Carson's story did not begin under a studio lights or in front of adoring crowds. It began in the quiet farmlands of Iowa, where a boy with bright eyes and restless curiosity was born on October 23, 1925, in the modest town of Corning. His parents, Ruth Elizabeth and Homer Lloyd Kit Carson, nurtured a family grounded in hard work, humor, and creativity, values that would later become the backbone of Johnny's career. He wasn't alone on this journey. Johnny grew up with an older sister and a younger brother, Richard Carson, who, perhaps inspired by Johnny's growing passion for performing, would one day find his own place in television as well. The Carson family moved frequently across Iowa, carrying with them boxes, memories, and the early sparks of Johnny's imagination, until finally settling in Norfolk, Nebraska, when he was just 8 years old. That little Nebraska town, quiet and unassuming, became the birthplace of Johnny's earliest dreams. It was where his talent began to bloom, first as a whisper, then a calling. When Johnny was 12, destiny arrived in the form of a simple magic book he stumbled upon at a friend's house. What should have been a forgotten curiosity became a life-changing moment. He devoured every page, memorized every trick, and soon sent away for his very first magician's kit. From that moment forward, the Carson household became his stage. He practiced endlessly, card tricks, sleight of hand, disappearing acts, so obsessively that his family joked they couldn't sit down for dinner without Johnny trying to make the silverware vanish. His mother, recognizing that this was more than a hobby, even stitched him a magician's cape by hand. By 14, Johnny was no longer just a boy with a deck of cards. He was the Great Carson, performing magic shows across the neighborhood and at local community events. His payment, $3 a show, was more than money. It was validation, a promise that maybe, just maybe, larger stages awaited him. After high school, he made a bold decision. With nothing but his ambition and a dream, Johnny hitchhiked all the way to Hollywood, hoping to find the world he had only imagined from magazines and radio broadcasts. But fate had other plans for him that would soon shape not only his career, but his character. World War II arrived. In 1943, Carson enlisted in the U.S. Navy. He trained under the V-12 Navy College program at Columbia University and Millsaps College, where he sharpened not only discipline, but intellect. Eventually, he served aboard the USS Pennsylvania as a communications officer, entrusted with top-secret decryption work, an enormous responsibility for someone barely in his 20s. But even in wartime, Johnny found ways to entertain. Aboard the ship, he became an undefeated amateur boxer, 15 wins, no losses, earning respect from sailors who eagerly gathered for each bout. But his proudest moment wasn't a punch thrown. It was a magic trick. He performed for James Forrestal, the Secretary of the Navy, and seeing a powerful man momentarily childlike with wonder convinced Johnny of something profound. He could entertain anyone, anywhere, anytime. When the war ended, Carson used the GI Bill to pursue an education. He enrolled at the University of Nebraska, first majoring in journalism before discovering that his heart belonged to performance. He switched to speech and drama, immersing himself in the study of humor and radio comedy. His senior thesis, an analytical breakdown of comedic timing in radio sketches. Proof that, even then, Johnny Carson approached entertainment with both passion and precision. He graduated in 1949 with a degree in radio and speech, and from there, the real climb began. A local radio and television station in Omaha became his training ground in 1950. It didn't take long for producers to notice his lightning-fast improvisation and undeniable charisma. He soon moved to Los Angeles, where fate intervened again. Comedian Red Skelton spotted his talent and hired him as a writer. One night, Carson filled in on live television for Skelton, and that single appearance skyrocketed his reputation. Soon after, Jack Benny invited him to perform on his program, pushing Johnny even further into the national spotlight. By 1962, NBC offered him the role that would make him a legend, host of The Tonight Show. He hesitated. 12 years was a long commitment. He ultimately accepted. And that decision changed television history forever. As Johnny Carson's fame soared, so did the complexity of the world around him. Behind the polished charm, the perfect comedic timing, and the effortless control he displayed on a stage, there existed a side of the entertainment industry few ever witnessed, one filled with negotiations, power struggles, and the often invisible battles waged behind closed doors. And in 1978, one such battle erupted. A conflict that would reveal far more about Johnny Carson's character than any monologue, interview, or performance ever could. Her name was Vivian Sharp, a prominent, fiercely intelligent female booking agent who had worked with Carson for years. Sharp wasn't just another industry figure. She was responsible for securing many of The Tonight Show's most memorable female guests, talented actresses, groundbreaking comedians, rising stars who would later credit the show for launching their careers. But beneath the surface of that professional relationship, tension simmered. Carson believed Sharp was taking too much commission, stretching the financial boundaries of their agreement. More importantly, he felt she wasn't bringing him the quality of talent he demanded. To Carson, The Tonight Show wasn't simply a platform, it was a cultural institution, and every guest mattered. Sharp, on the other hand, believed the opposite. She felt Carson undervalued her work, her connections, and the irreplaceable role she played in shaping the show's lineup, especially when it came to high-profile female personalities who brought sparkle and unpredictability to the stage. Their disagreement quickly escalated from quiet frustration to public tension. According to accounts from the era, Sharp accused Carson of making inappropriate comments about certain women she represented, remarks she found unprofessional, disrespectful, and in conflict with the image he projected to millions of viewers. Carson's response was sharp and strategic. He began weaving subtle jokes about her into his monologues and on-air commentary. For America, those jokes were harmless. For Sharp, they were humiliating. Behind the scenes, the atmosphere grew heavier, charged with emotions rarely seen in Carson's carefully controlled world. Eventually, Sharp reached her breaking point. She stormed into Carson's office, confronting him directly. Woman to man, agent to host, equal to equal. She told him his behavior crossed the line, that the public mockery needed to stop, and that she would cease working with him entirely if it continued. It was a moment that peeled back the layers of Carson's world, a reminder that even the most charming man in America was not immune to conflict, ego, or the consequences of his power. Producers later revealed something even deeper. The feud exposed Carson's sensitivity about maintaining absolute authority over his show, especially when it came to female talent agents and female guests. The Tonight Show was his kingdom, and any challenge to his control struck him harder than he ever let on. Yet the aftermath of this clash changed him. Carson became more aware of his tone, more conscious of how his jokes, so often harmless, could impact the women who worked behind the scenes. He remained sharp but more measured, still funny but more calculated. The feud left an imprint that subtly shaped the way he engaged with female guests for years to come. And now, with the stage set, with the curtain pulled back on Carson's vulnerabilities, we are finally ready to unveil the 7 extraordinary women who captured his admiration more than all the others. Women who didn't just appear on The Tonight Show, they left a mark on Johnny Carson himself. When Joan Rivers stepped onto Johnny Carson's stage, she wasn't just another comedian hoping for a laugh. She was a rising storm of sharp wit, bold honesty, and comedic courage that few performers, male or female, had ever dared to unleash on national television. And Johnny Carson knew instantly that she was special. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, Rivers appeared on The Tonight Show more than 150 times, making her the single most frequent female guest in the history of Carson's run. But it wasn't just the quantity of her appearances that mattered. It was the unmistakable electricity that filled the room whenever she sat across from Johnny. Rivers worked harder, thought faster, and pushed boundaries more boldly than almost anyone else in show business. She had no fear, not of public opinion, not of Hollywood politics, and certainly not of Carson himself. She made jokes about everything: marriage, fashion, aging, celebrities, and most brutally, herself. Her comedy wasn't just humor, it was honesty weaponized with impeccable timing. Carson admired that immensely. Unlike with many guests, he didn't compete with her for laughs. He set her up, giving her the space, the rhythm, and the perfect lines to explode into one-liners that brought the entire studio to tears. Their chemistry was so natural that even viewers at home felt like they were watching 2 master performers dance effortlessly through an unscripted routine. And the audience wasn't the only one mesmerized. Carson often laughed harder at Rivers than the crowd did. Not polite, host-style laughter, but the genuine, unrestrained laughter of a man who recognized brilliance when he saw it. Her 1975 Tonight Show appearance changed her life overnight. Before that moment, she was struggling financially, scraping by in clubs and small TV gigs. After that moment, she was suddenly everywhere. Nightclubs, television specials, talk shows. Doors that had been sealed shut swung open with force. And Joan Rivers never forgot who turned the key. Behind the scenes, she spoke of Carson with real affection, calling him fair, smart, and generous with his comedic instincts. She respected him not just as a host, but as an artist, and Carson trusted her more than almost any other guest. He let her guest host The Tonight Show numerous times, something he allowed only with performers he believed could uphold the show's prestige while preserving its heartbeat. What made Rivers so important to Carson was not just her comedy, it was her integrity, her willingness to risk everything for a joke, her refusal to let fear dictate her performance, her ability to shine without overshadowing, and to elevate The Tonight Show every single time she appeared. She wasn't simply a frequent guest, she was a creative partner, a mirror to Carson's own brilliance, a phenomenon who helped define an era of late-night television. And she was only the first. Now we move to the second woman who captivated Johnny Carson in a completely different way. The indomitable queen of television comedy. When Lucille Ball walked onto the Tonight Show stage, something extraordinary happened. Even Johnny Carson, who had interviewed thousands of stars, seemed to sit a little straighter, smile a little wider, and radiate a rare sense of reverence, because Lucy wasn't just another celebrity guest. She was television royalty. By the time Carson took over The Tonight Show, Lucille Ball had already become a towering figure in American entertainment. Her groundbreaking sitcom, I Love Lucy, didn't just revolutionize comedy, it rewrote the entire language of television. She had shaped an era, set the gold standard, and become a cultural icon whose influence stretched across generations. So whenever she agreed to appear on Carson's show, it wasn't just another interview. It was an event. Producers felt it. The audience felt it. Even Johnny felt it. The energy in the studio changed. Anticipation, nostalgia, respect, all blending into a rare kind of electric warmth. Viewers leaned closer to their screens because they knew a legend was about to do what she did best: surprise, delight, and captivate. Lucille Ball's genius was not confined to scripted lines or rehearsed scenes. Even in casual conversation, she could turn a moment into comedy gold. She used her face, her voice, her posture, and her uncanny sense of timing to create a spontaneous humor that simply could not be replicated by anyone else. And Carson understood that immediately. Instead of steering her into standard talk show dialogue, he gave her space, open space, to play, to react, to ignite laughter in ways that defied the typical interview format. Whenever Lucy appeared, The Tonight Show transformed from a talk show into something closer to a live comedic experiment. Johnny didn't try to outshine her. He didn't interrupt. He didn't compete. He celebrated her. With Lucy, Carson set aside his ego and embraced the role of admirer, collaborator, and audience member all at once. He recognized her brilliance and wanted the world to see it as vividly as he did. Off camera, Lucille Ball spoke highly of Carson, praising his intelligence, his generosity, and his professionalism. She respected him not just as a performer, but as a host who understood how to elevate his guests rather than overshadow them. Her appearances on The Tonight Show throughout the late 1970s and 1980s served as living reminders of why she had dominated television for decades. Every time she returned, she raised the show's prestige, affirming once again that Carson's Tonight Show had become the new center of American entertainment, and the significance was mutual. For Johnny, booking Lucille Ball wasn't just a ratings victory. It was validation, proof that even the most celebrated figures in Hollywood saw his stage as the place to be. She was more than a guest. She was a symbol, a reminder of comedy's golden age and a bridge between its past and its future. And for Carson, having her on his couch was nothing short of an honor. When Carol Burnett walked onto the Tonight Show stage, something rare happened. Johnny Carson wasn't just welcoming a guest. He was welcoming a peer. Burnett was not simply promoting a movie or filling a late-night slot. She was a titan in her own right, the mastermind behind one of the most beloved and influential variety shows in television history. The Carol Burnett Show was not merely a success, it was a cultural force, a weekly masterclass in sketch comedy, character work, and ensemble performance. So whenever Carol Burnett joined Carson, it felt like two worlds of comedy colliding. Her presence wasn't just exciting, it was historic. Carson admired Burnett deeply because she wasn't just a performer. She was a creator. She built her own empire. She made the stars out of her ensemble. She refined a style of comedy that blended physical humor, musical theater, absurdism, and heartfelt storytelling. She wasn't borrowing anyone else's vision. She was the vision. When Carson hosted her, audiences sensed it immediately. These weren't typical interviews. They were meetings of two comedic architects who understood timing, improvisation, audience psychology, and the delicate art of making millions laugh as if speaking to just one person. Burnett's comedy style was bold and elastic. She could go from dramatic to absurd, from sharp dialogue to exaggerated physical gags, often within seconds. Carson, whose comedy leaned more on wit and conversational rhythm, loved watching her push boundaries he rarely explored. Producers later revealed that Carson gave Burnett more freedom than he gave most guests. She could take a sketch in any direction she pleased. She could surprise him. She could challenge him. And he welcomed it. Together, they created moments that were spontaneous, unpredictable, and thrilling for audiences who rarely saw Carson step outside his structured format. Burnett could get him to participate in bits he wouldn't dream of attempting with any other guest. Their chemistry was unmistakable, warm, respectful, creatively charged. Ratings didn't lie either. The Hollywood Reporter documented noticeable spikes whenever Burnett was scheduled to appear. Viewers tuned in because they knew something special was about to happen. Two giants meeting in the same room, shaping comedy before their very eyes. What made Burnett's relationship with Carson so meaningful was the balance of power. She didn't come seeking approval. She didn't walk on stage timidly. She didn't treat Carson like an untouchable gatekeeper of late-night television. She treated him like an equal, and Johnny respected her all the more for it. Behind the scenes, both Burnett and Carson spoke highly of each other for years. Their admiration wasn't manufactured for the cameras. It was genuine, rooted in decades of shared understanding, shared risks, and shared love for the craft of making people laugh. Carol Burnett didn't just elevate The Tonight Show. She elevated Johnny Carson himself. When Phyllis Diller burst onto The Tonight Show stage, she brought with her a whirlwind of chaos, color, vulnerability, and volcanic laughter. She wasn't polished, she wasn't restrained, she wasn't following any of Hollywood's rules, and that was precisely why Johnny Carson adored her. With her trademark explosive cackle, eccentric hair styled like a comedic thundercloud, and a persona built on outrageous self-deprecation, Diller felt like a spark that lit up every corner of the studio. She made audiences roar, not because she pretended to be perfect, but because she openly embraced being imperfect. She joked relentlessly about her appearance, her love life, her age, her failures, things other comedians considered too risky or too personal. But Diller did it with such warmth and humanity that viewers didn't laugh at her. They laughed with her. They felt her courage. Carson understood that vulnerability better than most. He knew that comedy at its core was often a shield forged from insecurity, and Phyllis Diller wielded that shield with fearless brilliance. Throughout her career, Diller appeared on The Tonight Show more than 70 times, a number that speaks volumes about how much Carson valued her presence. Whenever she walked on stage, Johnny would lean back in his chair, not disengaged, but delighted, ready to witness whatever unpredictable direction she planned to take the conversation. Where Joan Rivers brought razor-sharp precision and Carol Burnett brought theatrical artistry, Diller brought raw, emotional authenticity. She didn't hide her insecurities, she weaponized them. She didn't avoid looking foolish, she embraced it completely. She didn't pretend to be glamorous, she celebrated the chaos of being human, and Carson loved her for it. What was especially notable was this: Johnny Carson, famous for taking comedic jabs at guests, never made jokes about Diller's appearance or style, not once. He instinctively understood that her entire brand was already built on playful self-mockery, and adding to that would shift the tone from collaboration to cruelty. So he laughed with her, he supported her, he let her lead. This restraint, rare for Carson, revealed his deep respect for Diller as both a woman and a performer. He recognized the fine line she walked between comedy and vulnerability, and he honored it. Behind the scenes, their energy remained warm and genuine. Producers often noted how easily Carson connected with her, and how naturally she drew out a side of him that was less controlled, more spontaneous, and more joyfully reckless. Phyllis Diller didn't just entertain Johnny Carson, she liberated him. She allowed him to lean into pure laughter, to drop the carefully managed persona, to enjoy comedy not as a host or arbiter of taste, but as an audience member thrilled by the honesty of another performer's fearlessness. And for a man who controlled late-night television with an iron grip, that freedom was priceless. When Bette Midler appeared on The Tonight Show, it was never just a television segment. It was an event, a moment audiences waited for, knowing they were about to witness something emotional, magnetic, and unforgettable. Because Bette Midler wasn't simply a guest. She was a force of nature, a singer with extraordinary emotional depth, a comedian with razor-sharp timing, an entertainer who could shift from laughter to heartbreak with a single breath. Carson admired her immensely, not just for her talent, but for her mastery. She had the vocal ability of a classically trained artist, the stage presence of a Broadway star, and the spontaneity of a gifted improviser. Nothing about her was ordinary, and Johnny knew it. Her appearances throughout the 1970s, 1980s, and early 1990s always carried a different kind of energy. The studio seemed to glow a little brighter when she walked in. Even Carson, usually guarded and controlled, appeared more open, more human when Bette Midler sat beside him. But everything changed in 1992. That year, Johnny Carson prepared to end his monumental 30-year run on The Tonight Show. Producers, staff, and networks all knew the final guests had to be chosen with absolute care. They had to be people who mattered to Carson, not just professionally, but emotionally. And Johnny Carson chose two names, Robin Williams and Bette Midler. Her selection was not a coincidence. It was a statement. On May 21st, 1992, the second to last episode of The Tonight Show aired, an episode now considered one of the most iconic moments in television history. Midler performed One for My Baby and One More for the Road, illuminated by a spotlight, delivering a rendition so haunting, so heartfelt, that the audience felt time stopped. As she sang, Johnny Carson's face softened, his eyes welled. A man who rarely revealed vulnerability, who kept the world at arm's length behind humor, allowed himself to feel. It became the emotional climax of his farewell. Earlier in the episode, they sang a semi-impromptu duet of Here's That Rainy Day, a song dear to Carson's heart. The simplicity of their harmonies, the warmth in their exchange, it was a moment that transcended entertainment and became pure, unfiltered human connection. The performance earned Bette Midler an Emmy Award later that year. But its true power was what it revealed. Johnny Carson trusted her. He respected her. He valued her as an artist whose presence could elevate his final chapter into something timeless. Across decades of appearances, Midler demonstrated extraordinary control over her craft. She could flip the room from roaring laughter to stunned silence with nothing more than her voice and authenticity. Carson admired that duality, her ability to be both a comedian and a soul-bearing vocalist. In interviews after Carson's passing, Midler spoke openly about how much she cherished their professional connection and how deeply his support meant throughout her career. Bette Midler didn't just grace The Tonight Show, she helped define it. And in return, Johnny Carson entrusted her with one of the most meaningful moments of his entire life on television. Whenever Goldie Hawn stepped onto The Tonight Show set, something magical happened. Not loud, not dramatic, but unmistakably warm and luminous. She carried with her a lightness, a joy, a gentle playfulness that made the entire room feel softer. And Johnny Carson absolutely loved her for it. Goldie Hawn was a rare kind of star, funny without cruelty, charming without calculation, spontaneous without chaos. Her laughter felt genuine. Her reactions felt authentic. Her presence felt effortless. And in a world where so many celebrities came armed with rehearsed anecdotes and rigid promotional agendas, Hawn stood out as a breath of fresh air. She didn't perform the interview. She lived it. Carson recognized that immediately. Over the years, Hawn appeared on The Tonight Show dozens of times, building a relationship with Carson that seemed rooted in trust, comfort, and pure comedic chemistry. Unlike many guests who followed scripted talking points, Hawn let conversations unfold naturally. She wasn't afraid of spontaneity, she embraced it. Producers later revealed an important detail. Johnny didn't just accept her bookings, he requested her. That privilege was reserved for only a handful of performers. Hawn wasn't just welcome, she was wanted. Her presence gently shifted Carson's demeanor. He laughed more openly, he relaxed more visibly. He allowed himself to join her silliness rather than simply direct it. And audiences felt it. Goldie Hawn brought out a side of Johnny that viewers rarely saw, a softer, more vulnerable, more joyful version of the late-night king. Videos from their interviews reveal something rare. Johnny Carson smiling with his real smile, not the polished one designed for cameras. That small but unmistakable difference showed just how deeply he enjoyed her company. Hawn possessed a unique ability to laugh at herself without sacrificing grace or dignity. She wasn't afraid to be silly or playful, and Carson found that honesty refreshing. So many performers tried to look perfect. Goldie tried to be human. The result was chemistry that audiences adored. Behind the scenes, Hawn later spoke warmly of her experiences on the show, crediting Carson for making her feel safe, welcomed, and free to explore her comedic instincts outside of film roles. For Johnny Carson, Goldie Hawn wasn't just a guest. She was a spark of joy, a light in the room, a reminder that comedy didn't always need to be sharp or edgy. It could also be tender, warm, and beautifully genuine. She made The Tonight Show brighter, and in turn, she made Johnny Carson a little brighter too. Cher didn't just appear on The Tonight Show. She arrived every single time like a revelation. A singer, actress, comedian, fashion icon, provocateur, and cultural chameleon, she was unlike anyone Johnny Carson had ever interviewed. Cher refused to fit into any box Hollywood tried to place her in. She reinvented herself constantly, boldly, and without apology, and Carson found her endlessly fascinating. Throughout their professional relationship, Cher appeared on The Tonight Show around 35 times, and each appearance carried a sense of unpredictability that electrified the room. She might come to promote a movie, only to spend most of the interview discussing philosophy, fame, relationships, or her latest self-reinvention. She might walk in wearing something dazzling and unconventional, then shift seamlessly into thoughtful commentary about the entertainment industry. Nothing about her was rehearsed. Nothing was safe. Nothing was dull. Carson admired that courage. Most performers showed up trying desperately to impress him. Cher showed up as herself, fearless, intelligent, and unapologetically honest. This confidence struck Carson as refreshing. He didn't need to coax her into conversation. He didn't need to protect her from difficult topics. He didn't need to manage her energy. He simply had to keep up. Producers and colleagues later revealed that Cher brought out a side of Carson that audiences rarely saw. Curious, introspective, and willing to probe deeper than he normally did. He asked her more personal questions. He engaged more thoughtfully. He listened more intently. With Cher, he wasn't just a host. He was a man genuinely intrigued. She wasn't intimidated by him either. Another reason their chemistry resonated so powerfully with viewers. While some guests tiptoed around Carson's authority and influence, Cher challenged him, teased him, pushed him, and treated him as an equal. Their exchanges felt natural, playful, and sometimes disarmingly honest, and Carson loved it. Cher's presence created space for conversations no other guest could generate. Conversations about identity, reinvention, artistry, independence, and the emotional toll of fame. She transformed The Tonight Show from a talk show into a window through which viewers could glimpse a deeper truth about a celebrity culture. In later interviews, Cher spoke warmly of Carson's intelligence, kindness, and genuine respect for her craft. She valued the way he treated her not as a spectacle, but as an artist with a perspective worth hearing. Their bond became one of the longest-lasting and most authentic professional relationships Carson ever had with a female performer. Cher didn't just impress Johnny Carson, she challenged him, she surprised him, she elevated him, and in doing so, she earned a permanent place in his heart and in the vast history of one of television's greatest legacies.